Welcome to one of my courses on emotional intelligence. My name's Robin Hills. I'm an emotional intelligence coach, trainer and facilitator. I'm here to help you to understand what emotional intelligence is all about and how you can use your emotional intelligence more efficiently and more effectively. This course is about emotional intelligence in teams and team working. The difference between an effective team and an ineffective team is the way in which the group uses their emotional intelligence. The team's emotional intelligence is the sum of each individual's emotional intelligence. However, there's the collective competency of the team, and this is underpinned by the way in which the leader is working with the team. Behaviours and personality play their part. And within the course there's an assessment to help you to understand how behaviour impacts upon you, your emotional intelligence, and the way that you interact with your team. A team, however, must attend to yet another level of awareness and regulation. It must be mindful of the emotions of its members, its own group emotions or moods, and the emotions of other teams and individuals outside its boundaries. Now, emotional intelligence is not about catching emotions and trying to suppress them. It's about working with emotions in appropriate ways in order that better decisions are made and sustainable quality relationships are built, both within the team and outside of the team. The course covers change and change management and the emotions people go through when they experience change. The course also explores resilience, team resilience and organisational resilience. The course is made up of a series of video lessons, some resources, and a series of exercises that are in downloadable files that you can print off and work with away from the course. If you're feeling stuck or feel something is missing in your life and you want to grow in your career and become better at your personal and professional relationships, then this course will help you. I'm here to help you as you work through the course, to support you and to answer any questions that you may have. I look forward to working with you and I hope you enjoy the course. So, let's get started. This course covers one aspect of emotional intelligence. I have a whole series of courses online, and this is a standalone course that complements the series. It's my intention to give you the best courses on emotional intelligence in the most cost-effective and efficient way, with resources that enable you to learn at your own pace and in your own time. There is a lot of information in the course, and there's probably too much for you to take in one go, especially if you're going to spend time completing the practical activities properly. You have lifetime access to the course, so take your time. Consider this as a project to complete over the next few weeks or months. All the material has been thoroughly researched and is continually being updated and refined as more information becomes available. So please check back in the future to see how things have changed. I hope you're enjoying the course. It's a bit too early to ask you that question, isn't it? But Udemy will be asking you for a review very shortly. This is a great test of your emotional intelligence as to how you're working with your emotions. Personally, I feel it's a bit too early for me to make a rational judgment based upon what I've experienced when I'm taking a course on Udemy. So I tend to skip this request and come back to it later when I can make a better decision. A good quality constructive review helps the instructor. This is an emotionally intelligent response rather than an emotional response. I hope you'll do the same, but if you feel that you can exercise your emotional response at this stage, please go ahead and do so. This is me. I'm using my natural speaking voice, and I use this throughout the course. Some people like it, some people don't. The pace suits people whose first language is not English to help them with their understanding. I've tried speaking faster, but strangely enough it makes me sound more robotic and monotonal. If I speak too slowly for you, you can speed the videos up by adjusting the playback settings. Speeding up the playback to 1.5 times normal speed works well. If I speak too quickly for you, you can slow the playback down in the same way. I've ensured that the captions are grammatically correct to enable you to follow them as an additional way to help. As you can see, I'm human like you, so I occasionally make mistakes and errors. If you find one in the course, let me know and I'll correct it. Again, this is an emotionally intelligent response rather than an emotional response. Remember, praise in public, criticise in private. Now, within this course, to make it a little bit more engaging and entertaining, I've hidden the letters that make up the word Udemy, U-D-E-M-Y, in some of the lessons. When you've completed the whole course and found all the letters, let me know and I'll send you a prize. You'll find the first letter at the end of this lecture, so that you know what you're looking for as you work through the rest of the course. You can contact me using my email address, which is in the final lesson entitled Bonus Lecture. The difference between effective teams and ineffective teams lies in the emotional intelligence of the group. Teams have an emotional intelligence of their own. It's made up of the emotional intelligence of the individual members plus a collective competency of the group overall. Everyone contributes to the level of emotional intelligence, but the leader has most of the influence. The good news is that teams can develop their emotional intelligence and improve their performance. Team emotional intelligence involves bringing feelings out into the open and talking about how they impact and affect the team's performance. If emotions are avoided, there's a tone of, everything's just right, everything's fine. Teams can't work together without having personalities that create some conflict. Admitting to this is the first step in being able to find some common ground upon which to move forward. Emotional intelligence is also about behaving in ways that build relationships both inside the team and outside the team. Building relationships strengthens the ability of the team to face up to challenges. In order to build relationships, the group has to be able to explore and rely on emotions at work. Emotions must be considered for the good of the team. Feelings count. But then there are the tasks at hand and the work that needs to be done. Team leaders have to balance harmony with productivity. By completing this course, you will be able to identify what emotional intelligence is and how it relates to teams. You'll be able to explore the emotions involved in change. You'll be able to recognize how people can behave in a range of different situations and how they react to change. You'll be able to determine ways to work effectively with behavioral styles of individuals within the team and how to work effectively with conflict. You'll be able to assess your own behavioural style and how you can adapt this to work with other styles to improve outcomes, reduce conflict and increase your performance. And finally, you'll be able to assess ways to develop resilience with individuals and with the team overall. I have a word of warning. You won't develop your emotional intelligence just by watching videos on your own. So you won't get the best out of the course unless you're prepared to commit to taking some action. Within the course, there are a series of practical activities that you can complete on your own, but they'll be much more useful to you if you complete them with your team. I'm a member of a dysfunctional team, and I do not accept that the people I work with care about my success and happiness, and I refuse to believe I can change. I realise this may come as a bit of a surprise, but together each achieves more is simply not true. People work here just for the money. Everyone knows my priorities. My own personal success is more important than my team's success. I feel that my co-workers
Emotional intelligence is an area of increasing study and research, and there are several reasons for this. Emotional intelligence is involved in many areas such as business management, leadership, motivation, decision making, conflict management, parenthood, and so on. In other words, emotional intelligence has many implications as there are interactions between humans. I promise you hands-on training with the things that you can apply immediately and see results. For this reason, I'm going to keep this introduction very, very brief. Let's have a look at the field of emotional intelligence in the history of human psychology. Just to give you some context where to locate emotional intelligence in the history of psychology. First, we have behaviorism. During 1950s, there were behaviorist trend. Psychologists were interested in observable behaviors, which could therefore be seen and observed, and excluded emotions and their implications in the behavior and reactions of individuals. Second, we have cognitivism. During this same period and up to the 1960s, we saw an emergence of the cognitivist current, which was interested in the recording of information by the nervous system. And these studies still did not take into account the importance of emotions. Third, we have multiple intelligences. Researchers became increasingly interested in multiple intelligences. They realized the importance of emotion in human behavior. We no longer separate logic from emotions, but realized that the two work together. Humans are complex beings and cannot be studied just from one point of view or the other. The two are intimately linked, so the heart and the brain. It may seem obvious to us today, but it was not the case before the 1980s or even the 1990s. Let me give you an example. Before the 90s, marketing mainly consisted on saying product A has more features than product B, so buy product A because it is better. Or product A has the same functionality as product B and it is cheaper, so buy product A. Until the work of Peter Salovey and John Mayer. Their work was popularized by Daniel Goleman in his famous book Emotional Intelligence, published in 1996. Marketers have since understood the power of emotions in buyers' decision making. That's why you see happy couples in a yogurt ad, a shirtless man with girls around him for a perfume ad, and so on. So marketers focus more on emotions than logic to convince their future buyers. Now, we are very clear that humans are not logical beings, but rather emotional beings. For this reason, it's very important to understand some key concepts of emotional intelligence. Now, what is emotional intelligence? The definition given by Daniel Goleman is as follows. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and control one's own emotions and to deal with the emotions of other people. And here are the most common areas in emotional intelligence research. First, self-awareness, which is the ability to identify, understand, and use one's own emotion. Second, self-regulation. So it's the ability to control your emotions in the face of everyday situations. Third, social skills, the ability to interact with others. Fourth, empathy, the ability to understand how others are feeling. And fifth, motivation. So motivating yourself to accomplish your goals while putting off instant gratification. So this is basically what we are going to cover during this training and much more. When talking about emotional intelligence, I find it very important to talk about different emotions and also their impact on our daily lives. Have you ever had this experience? You are peacefully driving your car, listening to your favorite music, having a great day. You are completely relaxed and you are approaching a junction. You know that you have the priority, and at the moment that you are at the junction, a car that was supposed to stop to let you pass cuts you off and you had to brake to avoid the collision. How does this situation make you feel? Imagine you are angry, you are furious. In the past, these kind of situations made me enraged, and this aggressiveness could have cost me a lot. We will see together what happens in the brain in this kind of situation. But what is important to understand here is that these kind of reactions have allowed us to survive in the past. We react to an external event without asking questions. I didn't ask myself, am I going to get angry or not? I did not take few seconds to think it over, then I made the decision to get angry after weighing the pros and cons. No, the emotion was automatic. So this example was very clear and speaks to everyone. But we can experience the same situations at work. For instance, a colleague makes a remark about your presentation in front of others. It can provoke an emotional reaction in you. It can be anger, or it can be surprise if you did not expect such a remark. It can be even sadness if he put you down in front of other colleagues. That's why I would like to introduce Paul Ekman's work on emotions. He has studied the impact of different events on your physiology. Our face shows signs, therefore, physiological reaction to an emotion. So, in less than half a second, your face can show an expression that give us an indication on the emotions that you are feeling. For example, blood rush to the face, or we can have increased heart rate, dilated pupils. So all these signs are physiological reactions to an emotion. And the reactions is even more intense for emotions such as fear or anger. I'm talking about all of this to show you that the emotions have an impact on your physiology. Humans, consciously or unconsciously, can easily detect these signals. Even someone who is untrained will have a feeling or a gut feeling that you are scared, or that you are angry, or that you are sad, although they will not know specifically why they are thinking this. This is why you have to learn to recognize your own emotions. If you want to hide an emotion, the words you say are not enough. Your physiology and your voice are important too. In fact, they show your emotional state much more than the word that you use. I like this quote from Christophe André, who said that emotions are the link between the body and the mind. And here is another important point. The most intense moment of an emotion lasts for just few seconds. So the intensity peaks of the emotion peaks and then it goes down. What is not normal, or at least it's not very healthy for you, is to continue to feel the emotion for hours after the event, especially negative emotions. So you can experience negative emotions, and that's fine, but the problem arises when you continue to feel these negative emotions for a long period of time. So, Paul Ekman, to go back to Paul Ekman's work, he concluded that we have 6 universal emotions: anger, fear, joy, surprise, disgust, and sadness. And here's what's important to remember here. These emotions can take other forms or nuances. I give you an example here. It's important to understand these nuances because sometimes they can create communication issues or communication problems. Because the same emotion can take different forms. For example, you may feel anger, but if the other person you are talking to says that they are feeling some irritation, you should understand that it is the same emotion. If one person says they are feeling nervous and the other may say they are feeling anxious or scared, you should know that it is the same emotion that ends up expressed in different ways. So understanding these differences and nuances prevent us from misinterpreting what others are saying. But there are also other emotions which can be a mixture of several emotions, such as shame, guilt, excitement, enthusiasm, and so on. These are a mixture of different emotions. We also have emotions that have a time component. For instance, anxiety, which is the fear of the future, and guilt, which is associated with an event from the past. I'm telling you about all this because your ability to recognize your emotions and those of others is a very important element in your success, whether in your private life or in your professional career. Now that we are clear about the importance of emotions and also the different emotions and their nuances, I found it important to debunk few myths related to emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is not just about be kind, smile, and be positive all the time. This is often the mistake many people make when they first hear about positive psychology. Negative emotions also play a role in our lives, and we will cover this topic more in details in the training. We also hear that we should suppress our emotions. Emotional intelligence doesn't require us to suppress our emotions. It's not healthy, by the way, to restrain our emotions. We have previously seen the direct link between emotions and the human body, and there are even studies that show the link between certain diseases and certain negative emotions. It is for this reason that we must learn to manage and express our emotions correctly. The goal is to understand our emotions and the message they contain in order to improve ourselves and our behaviors, and also in order to act instead of react. The goal of emotional intelligence is to give us back the control over our reactions and not reactions. Emotional intelligence is recognizing your emotions in order to take the right actions. I like the quote from Aristotle who said, "It's easy to get mad, but harder to get mad at the right person, at the right time, and in the right way." Now that we are clear about what emotional intelligence is, let's take a closer look at some benefits of emotional intelligence at work. Employee management. Emotional intelligence helps us develop our empathy in order to understand what the person in front of you is feeling. Conflict management. Emotional intelligence helps us manage conflicts with elegance. We will have the opportunity to explain this point later in the training. Giving and receiving feedback. Emotional intelligence helps us communicate our opinions with others without hurting them. And there are other many more benefits to emotional intelligence. Here's my point here. In Western societies, we tend to dissociate ourselves from our emotions, especially in the corporate world. We often hear, "This is business, nothing personal." Unfortunately, this kind of mindset can be devastating in the business, whether for its performance or for its employees. After all, we are emotional beings, and luckily things are changing. changing in the corporate world. Peter Drucker, a visionary who wrote a lot of books about personal development, management, leadership, he explains that with the specializations of tasks, the unit of work is no longer the individual, but the team. He goes further by explaining that the group IQ is not the average IQ of each individual. There is another element that comes into play, which is the harmony between the members of the team. If the members of a team are not in harmony with each other, their group IQ will be lower than the average IQ of each individual. This harmony can be achieved by developing emotional intelligence, having self-awareness, and being clear about our needs and the emotions of others. So, by improving the emotional intelligence of the group, we can increase both the productivity and the employees' well-being. In this video, I would like to share with you 5 techniques for developing your emotional intelligence. The first one is express your emotions when necessary. Sometimes it is necessary to set limits or boundaries. We do not necessarily choose our colleagues. Some may exceed certain limits. They may say things or behave in a manner that we do not like. If you find that you are not respected, for example, it is your responsibility to set the limits and the boundaries for the behavior that you accept, and the things you should make it clear to the other person what you consider as unacceptable. To do this, you should use the personal pronoun I when expressing your emotions. And here are some examples. I don't feel respected when you criticize me in front of other colleagues. I feel bad when you ask me questions that are too personal. I feel tense when you delegate meeting to me at the last minute. When using the pronouns I, you do not attack the other person. You express your feeling and the other person do not feel attacked. This helps a lot avoiding conflict. So, you express your emotions without creating a situation of you against me. The second technique is to enrich your vocabulary. In order to express your emotions, you need to build your emotional vocabulary. We have talked about the nuances of different emotions, and I'm putting other emotions here for you based on their intensity. It also helps you to determine how you are feeling. Instead of saying, I'm angry, ask yourself, are you tense, irritated, upset, agitated, unhappy, revolted, or furious? The more clear you are about how you are feeling, the better you can tailor your response. So by enriching your vocabulary, you will better understand yourself, you will better understand what others are feeling, and then increase your empathy, which improves your relationship. And here's a very useful technique. Count to 10, or at least to 3. It's not always easy to stay calm around people who evoke emotions in us. This is why you need to be proactive. What I mean by that is that you have to have techniques in place that allow you to keep your emotions in check. One of the techniques that I particularly like is counting to 10, or at least to 3. In addition to helping you control your emotions, this technique prevents you from saying something that you may regret later. How many times have we said something out of rage and later regret it? So when someone brings up a certain emotion in you, they say something to you, they do something to you, or they don't do something they have promised, count to 10. This gives you enough time to relieve the pressure. If by the time you get to 10, you still feel edgy or restless, take a break. Get outside to get some fresh air. Then use the technique we saw together to express your emotions. Above all, don't take it upon yourself. You have to talk if something isn't right for you, as not to build up resentment and bring it out all at once. This is exactly what we would like to avoid. I'm sure that you have seen people not saying anything for a long period of time, and suddenly they explode when they had enough. This is exactly what we'd like to avoid. Fourth, put yourself in the other person's shoes. We will have the opportunity to come back to empathy more in details. Here I would like to point out that sometimes the others that we consider as difficult, they are not difficult for fun. Put yourself in their shoes. Try to see things from their point of view. That being said, you should not tolerate behavior that crosses the line. Put yourself in their shoes to understand their point of view, but all of this should not be an excuse to pass up unacceptable behavior. Very often, when we put ourselves in the other person's shoes, we better understand their reactions and we are more able to adjust our behavior to create a win-win situation. I'll give you an example. Your manager tends to delegate meetings to you at the last minute, which causes you a lot of stress and anxiety. If you put yourself in his own or her shoes, you may notice that she has a team of, let's say, 15 people to manage. She is often overwhelmed and she cannot manage everything by her own. She relies on you to help her, and sometimes she forgot to tell you about important meetings. So a win-win situation or win-win solution would be that you have a regular catch-up with her at the beginning of the week or twice a week to take a look at her calendar, her agenda, and see if she needs you to attend one or two meetings. The fifth technique that I would like to share with you is eliminate negative thoughts. Here's something that has helped me tremendously, which is becoming aware of my own thoughts. Researchers have shown that we have around 70,000 thoughts per day. I don't know how they managed to measure that, but this is the number that come up very often in the different books that I have read. What is interesting is that 90% of these thoughts are the same. In other words, we have a kind of a broken record in our head. We often have the same thoughts circling over and over. This is not an issue as such, but the scary part is 80% of these thoughts are negative for most people, which means that most people dwell on negativity all day long. But here's the good news. You can only have one thought at a time, which means that when you think about something negative, you can immediately eliminate that thought by forcing your brain to think about something positive, your goals, for example. When focusing on something positive, you eliminate immediately and automatically the negative thoughts. This is what I did for a long period of time until the reflex of always thinking about my goals became automatic. It takes some effort at first, but after a while, you will naturally think about your goals as soon as negative thoughts start to enter your mind. Before finishing this section, I would like to talk about the brain, its development, and also its relationship with human emotions. So, the brain, that mysterious part of our body that we still have not yet fully understood. Look, I will simplify a lot just to make this explanation clear and concise, but keep in mind that the brain still hides a lot of mystery. So, the most primitive part is it's located at the top end of the spinal cord. It manages vital functions such as the beating of our heart, breathing, metabolism, and other organs in the body. This part of the brain has no emotion and it does not think neither. The reptilian brain, therefore, has survival as its mission. It's binary, yes or no. For a given situation, it always has the same reaction, an automatic reflex. So for a stimulus, there is always the same reaction. Then the part above, this is called the limbic brain. It is this part that is responsible for the emotions. This part memorizes, decides, and communicates its result to the other two parts of the brain. So this brain decides emotionally and it validates the decisions made by the neocortex, which is the part responsible for the logic. So, and finally, this is also the part of the brain which is called new brain or neocortex, which is responsible for logic, reasoning, and consciousness. This part deals with processing the stream of information we receive each second. This is also what gives us, as human, the intellectual advantages, and it's more developed than the other animal species. This is what also allows us to develop strategies, art, culture, and all of this is the result of the neocortex. As far as emotions are concerned, we have just seen together that it is the limbic brain that is responsible for them. So stress, for example, is managed by the amygdala, which is the center of the fear. So the amygdala interprets an outside signal and determines whether or not we are threatened. If so, it immediately releases stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, which, among other things, increase the heart rate and prepare the body for fight or flight. Something very interesting to keep in mind is that in case of danger, in case of stress, the frontal part or the neocortex, which is responsible for logic, for decisions, is completely deactivated. So the rational part of our brain is bypassed so as not to waste time thinking. We must act and we must act quickly. This mechanism has allowed us to survive in the past. So people who experienced a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, even depression, have their amygdala that sends as warning signals for things that are not really threatening. The amygdala believes that the danger is permanent. And there is another part of the limbic system that is believed to calm the amygdala once the danger has passed, and therefore gives control back to the prefrontal cortex. The hippocampus is like a librarian. It stores and manages the information we receive. You can imagine the hippocampus saying, I recognize this situation, I have been through in the past, and there was no danger, so we can calm down. Except that in case of chronic stress, the amygdala releases so much stress hormones that the neurons linked to the hippocampus are destroyed and therefore no longer perform their function. We will see together techniques for learning to calm down and better manage your emotions, and so that the amygdala can play its role normally. But I found it interesting to include this part to better help you visualize the relationship between emotions and the human brain. In the process of developing your emotional intelligence, self-awareness is very important. It allows you to get to know yourself better, to better understand your strengths, your areas of improvement, your motivations, and also the things that evoke certain emotions in you. By being very clear about all these aspects of your personality, you will be able to manage your emotions, make better decisions, and live a more congruent and happy life in general. In addition, when you have a good sense of yourself, you are more confident, you are more comfortable with criticism from others, and that too puts you in a very good position to succeed in your projects because you know what are your strengths and also what are the things that you need to work on and the areas where you need to ask for help. In the area of emotional intelligence, self-awareness helps you to know what causes you stress, what can annoy you or irritate you, what makes you happy and why, what makes you unhappy and why, what amuses you, and so on. The answers to these questions are very important because they help you better manage your emotions. I will give you an example from my personal life. With my wife, we like to travel, and more particularly, we like to go on road trips. We used to live in Australia, where there are beautiful places to discover all around the country. And I noticed that in the evening, after a long day of hiking, driving, visiting, and so on, we tended to get in conflicts more easily. This happened several times before we realized that at night, when we are tired, we may be hungry, it is a time when we are more susceptible, easily irritated, and the slightest remark can escalate very, very easily. But now we are aware of this, and therefore it's easier to spot the beginning of a conflict. And the simple fact of being aware of our emotional state around this time of the day help us a lot to avoid unnecessary arguing. This example is from my personal life, but the same concept can also apply in your professional life. The goal is to understand your emotions in order to better manage them, and that's exactly what we will see in the next video.
Hello, and welcome to this learning module on modern slavery, which covers what modern slavery is and how to spot it, why modern slavery is relevant to Airbus, and how to report concerns. Modern slavery can be all around us, but most people don't even realize it. It can potentially be found in every country, region, and sector. According to the Global Slavery Index, there are over 45 million people living as modern slaves throughout the world, including around 5.5 million children, and over 70% of all victims are female. And it's big business. Of the 25 million slaves considered to be victims of forced labor, the International Labour Organization estimates that 16 million work in the private economy, generating around $150 billion per year. Modern slavery is one of the gravest forms of human rights abuse and can range from human trafficking, servitude, forced labor and prostitution, to forced marriage and forced organ removal. Others include child labor, debt bondage where the person uses labor to pay off a debt, and descent-based slavery where people are born into slavery. What connects all of these is that individuals are pressurized by others into work or providing a service against their will through abuses of power. And because modern slavery is hidden, it is notoriously difficult to detect. Whilst it may involve physical constraint or punishment to stop workers leaving, it can also involve more subtle practices, including deceptive recruitment, withholding identity documents or wages, restriction of movement at work or whilst being transported, physical and sexual violence. Victims may be also obliged to work excessive hours, be denied breaks and days off, or forced to take over the work of absent colleagues. Anyone can be a victim, and you can find details of many more indicators in the International Labour Organization's booklet on the indicators of forced labour. Modern slavery can also be closer than you think. So you should be aware, for example, when you're at work or when you are with a supplier. Victims may show signs of physical or psychological abuse, appear malnourished or unkempt, anxious, agitated, withdrawn or neglected. They may have very few personal possessions and often wear the same clothes, which may not be suitable for their work. There are many more indicators outlined in the attached link on how to recognize modern slavery. Many governments are taking action to combat human rights abuses, including modern slavery through various laws, many of which affect Airbus, including the UK and Australian Modern Slavery Acts, which require organisations to produce an annual statement setting out their approach to reducing the risk of modern slavery and human trafficking in their operations and supply chain, and France's Devoir de Vigilance, which requires organisations to develop an annual vigilance plan of the steps taken to prevent violations of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and the health and safety of people and the environment in its operations and supply chain. Plus more. Stakeholders are also increasingly aware of the impacts businesses can have on human rights. For example, as the financial impact of human rights management is better understood, investors are increasingly asking business how they are managing and mitigating these risks to inform investment decisions. And customers are requesting human rights management information from their suppliers, including Airbus, to help them to report and also to inform purchasing decisions. Airbus has a zero-tolerance approach to all human rights abuses, including modern slavery. And whilst we operate in a highly regulated high-technology industry, this does not mean we are not exposed to risks. We should therefore look closely not just at the potential impact of our own operations, but also that of our suppliers. As such, we have taken a series of actions including raising awareness with employees on the signs of modern slavery and how to raise concerns, a review of appropriate policies and processes, mapping of risks in our operations and with our suppliers, and outlining our commitments in a modern slavery statement. You can find out more by looking on the hub. And you can help combat this issue. So be informed, be aware, and take action. If you are concerned about any human rights issues, contact your line manager, your human resources business partner, your legal or ethics compliance representative, or you can also report concerns confidentially through the Airbus Open Line. Further information can be found in the Airbus Human Rights Policy, which contains expectations and commitments for respecting human rights. The Airbus Code of Conduct, which contains our expected behaviours and responsibilities and how to report concerns. And the Airbus Supplier Code of Conduct, which contains expectations of our suppliers to respect human rights. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye. Welcome to this learning module on human rights, which covers what human rights are and how they relate to business, why human rights are relevant to Airbus, and how to report concerns. Human rights means that all people have a right to be treated with dignity and respect. We are all born free and equal. We all have our own thoughts and ideas, and we should all be treated in the same way. These rights belong to everybody, whatever our differences. The basis for all human rights standards and laws is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It sets out the fundamental human rights to be universally protected and has been translated into over 500 languages. It has been converted into international law through 2 international covenants, both of which have been endorsed by over 160 countries. These are civil and political rights. For example, the right to enjoy physical and spiritual freedom, the right to fair treatment, and the right to meaningful participation in the political process. And economic, social, and cultural rights. For example, the right to decent work and education, and the right to access science and culture. The Universal Declaration requires states to protect human rights. But the extent to which this applied to business was unclear. In 2011, the UN Guiding Principles were introduced, which sets out the responsibilities of both states and business through 3 pillars. First, the state's duty is to protect the human rights of individuals against abuse by third parties, including business, through appropriate policies and laws. Secondly, it is the responsibility of business to respect human rights and act with due diligence to avoid infringing human rights. Finally, both states and business need to provide access to effective remedies for victims of human rights abuses. This business responsibility to respect means business must identify, avoid, and address any negative human rights impacts they may cause or contribute to by adopting a policy commitment to respect human rights, undertaking ongoing human rights due diligence, having reporting channels in place. We invite you to watch the video attached for more information. So, what are the ways in which Airbus could impact a person's human rights? And how are we addressing this? Human rights abuse in business could include bullying, harassment, safety at work, data protection, and more. Airbus operates in a highly regulated high-technology industry, but this does not mean that we are not exposed to human rights risks. We should therefore look not just at the potential impact of our own direct operations, but also across our supply chain. According to the UN Guiding Principles, businesses must avoid causing or contributing to adverse human rights impacts through their own activities and prevent and address the adverse human rights impacts that are directly linked to their operations, products, or services by their business relationships. Airbus has a zero-tolerance approach to all abuses of human rights, and as such, we are committed to taking into account international human rights standards and principles, including the UN Guiding Principles. In addition, as a signatory to the United Nations Global Compact, we are committed to upholding the Compact's 10 core principles, which includes a commitment to respect and promote human rights, as well as to ensure that we are not complicit in human rights abuses. We have also outlined the fundamental human and labour rights principles in our joint international framework agreement, outlined the expected behaviours and responsibilities of all employees, including those related to human rights, through the Airbus Code of Conduct, explicitly outlined our expectations and commitments with regard to respecting human rights in a human rights policy, requested suppliers sign agreement to our Supplier Code of Conduct, which includes enhanced human rights provisions, implemented human rights due diligence to identify risks within our operations and supply chain, and initiated awareness raising, such as through this learning module. However, it takes everyone to play their part. So be informed, be aware, and take action. Wherever you are in the business or with a supplier, if you are concerned about any human rights issues, you can contact your line manager, your human resources business partner, your legal or ethics compliance representative. Or you can also report concerns confidentially through the Airbus Open Line. We would now like to invite you to look in more detail at an example of human rights abuse, which is modern slavery. Please now open the learning module on modern slavery, and I'll see you very soon.